I think one of my gifts and skill sets is being able to create systems and processes, not just for myself, but for other people.
People have families and kids, larger families. So where is that moment for them where they take that leap?
Tell your family, hey, I need to sacrifice 5 or 10 hours a week to focus on this after you go to sleep or in the morning.
What caused you to laser focus? What was that moment?
There's this fear of the unknown. I know I can make things work, but you take bigger and bigger risks as you get bigger and bigger into business, whether you're buying more inventory or you take out a loan.
There is this perception out there that the 9 to 5 is secure. That's where you're safe.
Jobs are fragile and you can lose them at the drop of a hat, so to speak. At least has side hustles. Even if you have a job and you have a side hustle, having that gives you some more security.
We think our time is worth, but unfortunately, too many people think their time isn't valuable.
That's why I have over 15 different streams of income at this point. It's because I can pivot if I need to.
Is there any specific quote that you tell yourself to keep moving forward?
It's not just about, I want to have a peaceful life. You seek it and you pursue it.
Today, we are sitting down with somebody that I consider a dear friend, someone I've gotten to know over the last, over 7 years now. We've created multiple businesses together, and it's really funny how we came to meet each other. And we'll save that conversation for another day. But if you happen to meet me or shake my hand, ask me about this, how we met. Now, this guy is brilliant when it comes to systems, numbers, and just scaling in general. I've admired his integrity and his heart to serve other people. He's someone who's trained and coached thousands of people in e-commerce space and built numerous businesses himself and sold nearly 10 million in revenue. Now, he did this by leaving the security of a corporate job. This is an episode about systems. We are answering the question, how do you build a business that serves your life rather than a life that serves your business? If you feel like you're drowning in the grind, this is your blueprint for getting out. Let's get started. Jimmy, welcome to the show, my man. It is amazing to see you. It's an absolute honor to have you in the studio today.
Karl, thanks, man. It's been so great, being invited onto this. I'm excited to talk with you about everything. And it's always been great knowing you for, I don't know how long at this point, 6-7 years, probably. I guess, at least 7 years.
Yeah.
You're a great friend of mine. And I'm so honored to be on this podcast.
Love it, man. Thank you. Appreciate that, man. Jimmy, my dude, you've got an impressive resume, man. Especially since I've known you in the span of time that I've known you. You sold well over $7 million in products on Amazon, and you've trained thousands of people, and you've made a pretty successful life, man, right? And you've really have designed by intention, the lifestyle that you have, right? But you didn't start there, and that's oftentimes, in my opinion, or my belief, that is what's missed. Most people see the highlight reels, but they don't see all the boxes in the living room per se, right? So give us a skinny, paint the picture of this gap, if you will, between the guy that's sitting here that I had the honor and privilege to speak with today versus the dude in 2017, sitting there. Paint us that picture, if you will.
Yeah. So I'll just go back to kind of the origin story of me starting to sell products online. Back it was 2015 whenever I started selling. And at that time, I was just looking for a way to start bringing in side hustle, side income from my typical 9-to-5 job. I used to sell corporate insurance, insurance to businesses, liability insurance, workers' comp, etc. And I really just didn't like it. I did well with it. I didn't like my job. I didn't like having somebody always watching over me. I didn't like having to be away from my family. And so that got me into looking into two different avenues. One was real estate investing, and the other one was Amazon, just doing arbitrage and buying products from one store, selling them on Amazon, for anybody that doesn't know that in your audience. So that's kind of what got me started. I chose the Amazon business, and that took off from there for the next couple of years. It was a side hustle. Ended up moving back to St. Louis which is where I'm from, and continued to sell insurance with a different company for a couple of years there until I decided to leave that role to fully pursue Amazon full time. And from that point, we grew the business to over $100,000 a month. I think our largest was right around 200,000. And in 2019, I started to do a training program because I was asked to by a friend of mine. And, that took off. I thought it was going to be like a month or two of my time. And it ended up being the last 6, 7, 8 years at this point, however long that's been, 7. And so that's how we met. We met in the same communities. And that's kind of the backstory. But really what started me in all of it that I don't really talk about a ton is just the internal struggle of wanting to be with my family, wanting to be at home, wanting to control my time versus, well, I've got this seemingly secure job, right? And that's kind of what got things going. Is I prioritized family, friends, and autonomy more so than the so-called security of a job, which I personally think is riskier than being an entrepreneur. We can get to that at a different or later on in the call if you want to. I think being an entrepreneur is more secure, but so that's kind of the origin story.
Awesome, man! Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting. You mentioned about you're asked to create this course in this program, and that's really right around the time you and I met, and when we look at the way, at least in that ecosystem, in that world, I would attribute a lot of that into what you created, right? You brought all of that into the spotlight. You did all the heavy lifting and to develop what we see today. A lot of people that coin that as replens, replenishable inventory, things you could buy over and over and over again and resell and so forth. But I think one of the points that you miss making is a lot of what we see today, at least in a lot of communities, is because of what you created, right? You specifically, Jimmy Smith, you created this. You systemized. In outside looking in, I think that's one of the amazing gifts that you have is the ability to systemize things and approach things from a systemized perspective so that you have the time. You can prioritize family time over, the micro level grind of business. And what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think one of my gifts and skill sets is being able to create systems and processes, not just for myself, but for other people. My whole goal is that it's not just something that I can follow and that I understand, but how do I actually teach it to somebody else? It is just something that I have, but what's great about that is that people learn differently from different people. So maybe some people didn't learn from me, but they've learned from somebody else that learned from me, but that somebody else is who's taught them how to do replens. And, I didn't come up with the replens concept. I was the first one to really scale it to the level that, at least as far as I'm aware of, to doing over 100,000 a month. But it's been an honor. It's been a blessing. I mean, it's been tens of thousands of people at this point that have gone through different trainings or have seen me on YouTube or something like that. If I look at the actual annual revenue that comes from replens in the way that we teach it, I mean, it's easily over $100 million a year in annual revenue from the replens model. It's great. If you think about it, it's not that many people to get to that. It's like 1,000 people at $10,000 a month in Amazon sales gets you there. And, that's really not that much, 10,000 a month on Amazon. We have people that do $2, $3, $4 million a year on Amazon. And so, that's just kind of the foundation. So if you really look at the scale, this is one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship. And then I try to look at from time to time to keep myself motivated is that, okay, let's say there's 1,000 people that have a $10,000 per month business. We've got $100 million a year in revenue. How many other people does that impact? Are their employees and team members, or the kids that see their parents start a job or start a business and succeed even at a small level or at a high level? Like that impacts them and their future and how they train their kids, et cetera. And so there's so much that goes into it, not even to talk about the customers that purchase these products and, how they get certain things. And during COVID, people couldn't get stuff. And so you and I, as at the time, arbitrage sellers were supplying those to people through Amazon. Like there's so much that goes into business. And that's why I love it. But, it's hard, and I think that I don't want to miss on this podcast the fact that it's not just about, okay, where were you 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, but it's what kind of things are we dealing with today? Because that never goes away. That internal battle, kind of the struggle of first off, fighting your own demons, so to speak. And second off, just the doubt and the fear and, the economy and all these other things. That never goes away. And I don't want people to think, oh, Jimmy's made it finally after 10 years of hard work.
Yes.
It never feels like you've made it. That for me anyway, I've never felt like I've made it.
Agree.
And, there's always more that you want to push. There's more that you want to do. And, I think that that's an important thing to realize, that no matter whatever the number is, it doesn't actually come back to the number. Like the number is never a satisfactory thing. It's going to be about the life that you're building around that. And so for me, that's something that I struggle with, is how much push do I have? How much pull do I have?
Yeah.
Do I keep pushing, or am I going to, kind of take away time from my family because I'm trying to build to hit a certain number, right? That's a constant battle. So I don't mean to ramble, but it's kind of what I'm dealing with.
No, that's a great point, man. And we're actually great points, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's a little bit of what I want to dive into. In some of the areas that you brought up, especially the internal battles, right? That is something that I personally can associate with, is having it's an evergreen problem, if you will, right? It's constant. There is no monetary thing that makes that just like, it goes away. It just doesn't. And oftentimes, unfortunately, too many people don't see that. And I attribute that to that it's not talked about enough, right? And that's an excellent point. Let me go back a little bit, because there was a pivotal time, and this is where I would like to highlight for a moment. You mentioned in your profile that the defining moment was missing a solar eclipse, with your family. Take us to that moment in that parking lot while your family was together without you. What did it feel in your gut in that moment?
So for me, this was probably back in 2017, I think. And I was working that corporate insurance job that I had mentioned. And there was an eclipse. And I think it was, I don't remember if it was solar or lunar, but it was like not a once in a lifetime eclipse, but pretty close to that. Especially coming over St. Louis, where I lived at the time. And, obviously they happened in different parts of the country, but it was just in St. Louis. And so it was in the middle of the day. It was a work day, and I wasn't with my family to watch it. Instead, all of us coworkers at the insurance job went out of the office. We sat in the parking lot. I mean, it's kind of a cool moment, but it was the thing that got me to realize, okay, I can't miss these events. I don't even have kids. I still don't, but I didn't at the time. And I didn't want to miss those types of things because I was at a job or because I was in an office. And so, there's some great things now in kind of the working landscape of the remote work is more possible. So if I ever did have to go get a job, I would be a remote worker. But the importance of being able to control my own schedule and time and not miss those important things, that is what got me to realize, okay, it's time to leave and to take the risk. Worst case at the time, I would just go back to selling insurance. Now I don't even have my insurance license anymore, so I can't do that. But yeah, that was the thing that got it for me. For some people, they missed their kids' dance recital, or they missed baseball game. For me, it was I missed the eclipse, watching that with my family, having that memory. Instead, I have a memory of sitting in the parking lot with a bunch of coworkers that I don't talk to anymore. So it's both disappointing, but I can look at it and say, hey, that was a defining moment in my life. Yeah. And I think it's important to appreciate those defining moments, even if they were difficult at the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing it, man. I think a lot of us have that defining moment that causes this internal stir for us to move. And quite frankly, we all have to have that, right? That defining moment to get us to take action, to get us to move into this new direction. And oftentimes too many people allow the what ifs, right? What if this fails? What if I don't have enough money? What if? But, if I'm understanding correctly, you're like, screw this. I'm going all in, right? And so what do you say to that person, right, that's listening right now, that's like, I want to say analysis paralysis, but for lack of a way of describing it right this moment, they're in paralysis right now. They feel this internal stir as they hear you talk about this family first philosophy, which I love. Walk this entrepreneur through this path of like, where's that jumping point for them? At what cost do they pursue family first, right? Because, sometimes people have families and kids, larger families. So where is that moment for them where they take that leap?
There's going to be those people I can speak to, and there's others that I can't fully relate to. I can't relate to the single mom of 6 that supports her family with an online business or is trying to, because I've just never been there. I also had the advantage at the time of being young. Whenever I quit, I'm still young, right? I'm 34, but whenever I was getting into Amazon, I would have been 24. And so, I quit at 26 or so. And there's definitely an advantage at that. I didn't have kids, but here's the advice that I typically give to most people. And it was actually kind of what I followed at the time, which was if you're able to build a side hustle, and you're doing it at 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week, whatever it might be, if you can get it to where you're making, let's just say at 20 hours a week, you're making half your typical 9 to 5 income. Well, the logic then would, if you keep following that, would actually be that if you were to leave your job and you were to work full time on the business, then you should grow it commensurate to how much you're working, right? So let's say you go from 20 to 40 hours a week, then your profits or your revenue should double if you continue doing the same things. The issue that people run into, which is what I did right away after I quit, was I tried to do a lot of other things. And none of those things worked. And what ended up actually working for me was doubling down on the thing that was working initially. But that would be my suggestion. So anybody that's sitting here, that's listening to this, they're trying to decide if they want to leave. They're feeling that stir, so to speak, to support their family. Don't just leave your job to go do something. You need to be smart about it. But start, tell your family, hey, I need to sacrifice 5 or 10 hours a week to focus on this after you go to sleep or in the morning or, kind of a combination, and work on that until you get it built to a level where you feel comfortable that if you were to leave your job and you were to focus 100% of your time and attention on it, that you'd be able to do that. I think that that's when it's safer. Some people wait till it's 100% of their income. I waited till it was about 50% of my income from my, full-time insurance job. And that's whenever I ended up walking away.
Man, that's gold right there, right? That really gives a pretty solid framework for some people to aspire to hit, some type of goal mark, right? Because there's a lot of talk of, what to do and so forth, but providing some type of goal mark, like this goalpost, this moment where, they reach in hopes of, because man, people need hope these days, right? There's so much going on social media and news and so forth. People need hope. So to give them that hope, that glimmer of hope, like, oh, okay, here's the path to walk, essentially, to get to 50%, 60%, 80%, or whatever that number is, right? Man, that's gold. I appreciate you sharing that, because, that's definitely a good path for folks to take. You mentioned that you did a number of things, right? There was a lesson that I caught there, which I could personally relate to. And I think a lot of founders, builders, entrepreneurs can relate to this, the lack of focus, right? They're spread too thin. What were some of the things that you were getting involved with, and what caused you to laser focus? What was that moment?
Yeah. So whenever I left my job at the time, I was fully reliant and dependent on Amazon as a seller to provide me income. And so I didn't like that, because as you know, and as I know, Amazon can suspend you. And now it's just as risky, if not more, than it was then. Although there was a wave of suspensions that happened around that time to people that I don't think deserved it or didn't do anything wrong. So it was kind of a weird time. But I got worried about, okay, I just left my job and I'm only dependent on Amazon. And if they were to suspend me or something were to happen, I'm without any income. And so I decided to try other things. Some of it was working with local businesses, trying to, I don't know if you remember local merch. This is a thing where you would,
I remember that.
Work with local businesses to try to create merchandise for their local business that then they would sell and you get a percentage. I tried doing that for a little while, did more with wholesale, tried doing some private label stuff. I know there were a couple other things that I looked into and I can't 100% remember at this point, but those were all distractions that I tried to do to get some extra traction. And so for me, I realized after 2 or 3 months, okay, our business didn't grow like I expected it to whenever I'm full time in this. And I had to kind of do an audit of why. And the reason was because I was too distracted. And so I decided, all right, well, hey, I left my job to do this Amazon thing full time. I should probably do it full time and just see how it goes, commit to it fully, got a warehouse, got a couple people working for us. I focused all my time on sourcing products instead of having to do the prep and ship, which I hated doing. That was one of the things that kept me from doing more. And so that is what helped me, is actually being fully doubled down and focused on the one thing. Now, as I've grown in my businesses in different ways, I've added multiple streams of income, but you can't do that. Personally, I don't think you can do that until you have one that's solid that you've actually done well with, and then you can branch out from there. You don't want to go from selling on Amazon to trying to do real estate and then also doing crypto. You want to do selling on Amazon to maybe writing a book on Amazon, or doing wholesale on Amazon, or doing a private label product, or doing a different e-commerce platform like Walmart or Shopify or Mercari or something else, right? So you can do it in a logical way, and that's part of what I like to talk about a lot now. So that's kind of the problem that I ran up against.
Man, thanks for sharing it, man. I personally can relate it just about everything you just said in the sense of spreading yourself too thin, right? There was a phrase I heard several years ago. I don't remember where it came from. Not really relevant, but basically it boiled down to millionaires didn't get millionaires because they were spread thin, right? Because of multiple streams of income. They became millionaires because they were laser focused on that one thing. Once that one thing was bolted down, then they were able to expand more oftentimes in the same vertical, right? Or that was in alignment of whatever it is that they were doing. That was complementary, right? For example, if you became a millionaire by starting a car wash or having a car wash, you don't go off and hello, yeah. Sure, that'll be edited out. Maybe, I don't know. But if the guy became a millionaire by starting a car wash, he's not going to go off and start a bank or whatever hot new thing, or an AI agency or something of that nature, right? It's typically complementary, using the skill sets they curated and perfected in their craft. So yeah, appreciate sharing that. Let me jam into an area that I think hits a lot of high achievers in the sense of like an identity crisis, if you will. I hate the word crisis, but you listed that identity is tied to success, and man, I think a lot of people can resonate with this. As far as being the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, when you finally quit the job to go full time, did the anxiety that you had, did that ever go away, or did it just change shape for you?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that too much in terms of the anxiety that I had, because it's hard for me to tap back into 10 or 8 years ago. I would say the anxiety has changed and morphed over time. So I have both an earned confidence and knowing that I can make money doing just about doing a lot of different things, either online or in person. I have confidence in myself because I've been doing this for 8 years. However, the anxiety of it going away, or economic and political changes happening that could hurt my business, or Amazon making some sweeping change to ultimately hurt some of the people that I help train and work with. Those types of things are still there. One of the things that I probably struggle with the most is some anxiety over that, which causes me to work harder in some ways. But also is a detriment because you can't work with a clear head if you're anxious about things. So, there's that constant struggle and battle of not wanting the things you're comfortable with to change or go away. Let's just put it that way. And, I think if I look at just the initial question that you had, I'm trying to remember exactly what that was, about now I'm blanking on it, not just the anxiety. What was the initial question that you had?
The initial question was, when you left that security, right? The security, we'll get to this in a second because I know you're itching to talk about this other part, but this perceived security of the insurance job that you had when you left that, right? Did that anxiety go away when you left that chapter, that season, or did it just change shape?
Yeah, it's definitely changed shape. So, it's gone away. At the time, whenever I left, I was worried if I could even make it work. And now it's not, can I make it work? It's, will something change on me, right? There's this fear of the unknown. I know I can make things work, but you take bigger and bigger risks as you get bigger and bigger into business, whether you're buying more inventory or you take out a loan or you're putting yourself out there more in the public eye. And so now people can make fun of your hair or something like that. And, these types of things just create new anxieties. Ultimately, I think the other question that you had, I remembered was just the kind of the viewpoint of wanting to always hold up that allure of being successful, kind of a deal, right? That other people view me and I get value, or I'm only valuable if I'm successful. That is something that I do struggle with, is what if I made a business mistake and something goes south and now everybody doesn't like me? I think that those are questions to have. Or what if things go, this is a different side of the coin that I haven't struggled with, but what if things go really well and I get really successful and then my friends don't like me?
That's a good point.
Like that. So there's always going to be something internal that you're battling with. It can be failure. It can be the fear of success. It can be anxiety or depression, whatever. These are hard things to deal with, and it's always going to be different. There is no protocol to say, as an entrepreneur, go do this X, Y, and Z, and you're going to avoid all these internal battles. No, I mean, you can go and do the exact same process as somebody else, but the reason you fail is because of your internal struggles, and the reason somebody else succeeds maybe because of their internal, just ability to push through, or their ability to have joy in every season. So I know this isn't probably as directionally helpful, but it is something to keep in mind, that everyone deals with these things. The words that you say to yourself, the people you surround yourself with, do determine how you will succeed. And I think that that's an important thing to know.
100% agree, man. 100% agree. Spot on. I'm reminded of a phrase: new levels, new devils, right? There is never a level where, once we've received this, whatever level we're at, right, the devils never go away. They just become more complicated, more risks associated with it. To your point, talking about, having to buy more inventory, or your payroll gets larger, so they never go away. You just learn how to embrace them. It's almost as identical to going to the gym, right? I mean, what's the benefit of being able to get stronger? Well, the weight gets heavier, right? It's the same concept. And I know you're answering about this because, you alluded to this, but talk about, in the sense of entrepreneurship and this perceived insecurity or security, because there is this perception out there that the 9-to-5 is secure. That's where you're safe. And I hear so many people, well, I wouldn't say so many, I've heard key people like Cody Sanchez and a few others talk about how that is not true. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's an element of a 9-to-5 that feels safe, because you're not always responsible, unless you're a salesperson. You're not always responsible for your income. So it kind of subsidizes your life in some ways. It's, you go to this job, you enter numbers into a spreadsheet, you get your check, or you go to this job and you serve people food and you get your check. And yeah, there's health insurance and there's other benefits that come with that, and that feels secure. However, I think that there's an inherent understanding, especially ever since the 2020 COVID and people getting furloughed and losing their jobs. People understand more than ever, at least in our current era, that jobs are fragile and you can lose them at the drop of a hat, so to speak. And so to me, I appreciate, as an entrepreneur or somebody that at least has side hustles, even if you have a job and you have a side hustle, having that gives you some more security, because if you lost your job, you've already got income stable, a little bit stable. Or if you are in a particular role where you start seeing the tides shift a little bit, you start to see that, okay, Amazon is not working as well as it used to, or, maybe it's harder for me to get a supplier, like my supplier raised prices and it's no longer a profitable item. And so now my income's going to go down because of that. Well, you can see these things early on. You don't typically just wake up and that income stream is completely turned off for you, usually. Now, there's always that risk in any business. Even if you're a regular business, you could be an accountant and have a chargeback or two, and then your merchant processor shuts off your account and you can't process payments. I mean, there's risk in entrepreneurship, but ultimately, you've typically got a good runway of being able to see, all right, this is changing, or this is going down. It's not working as well. And so I'm going to add another stream of income. I'm going to switch how I do things so that then I have another opportunity to change it up. If you're a contractor and some, big contracting firm moves into town or something and starts taking all your work, well, maybe you have another opportunity to change up how your business operates. There's so much to it. I think that you've got an ability to pivot, where with a job you do not. With entrepreneurship, you have the ability to double, triple, quadruple your income in a year. With business or with being an employee, you do not, and you're just a number. Especially if you're working with any kind of big company. If I'm in Orlando, Disney is one of those big companies here. Everyone there is just a number. And it's so much just a number that they have a points-based system. And, if you hit so many points, you get fired. And those points are, they don't care about what you're going through, typically. And, that's going to be one thing that just happens because you're so large, they have to make those cuts. Or you're working at Amazon, and Amazon needs to be beholden to their shareholders, and they need to save 1% or 1 point on their stock pricing and stuff. Like, they just cut 30,000 jobs. That would be one reason, right? So being an entrepreneur gives you that ability to pivot, gives you the ability to grow much faster than in anything else. The best investment typically anyone can make is in a successful business that they're operating. Now, you can also fail, and that is a reality where with employment, you can't really fail unless you don't show up, but you don't have control over your decisions like you do in entrepreneurship.
I agree, man. Well said, dude. The other benefit to this, when we look at entrepreneurship versus 9 to 5, in entrepreneurship, you're selling value, right? Whereas in 9 to 5, you're selling your time. So you're limited at scale, which you said very well. But one of the reasons why in entrepreneurship you're able to scale almost infinitely is the ability to sell value, right? What are you delivering? Are you delivering $1 million worth of value or $10 million worth of value, either through product, service, or whatever? Versus in a 9 to 5, you're merely just selling your time, And I'm of the belief that everybody's time, because it is finite, like our energy, that should be a pretty high number, and no employer is willing to pay, in my opinion, and I'm sure you would agree, what we think our time is worth. And unfortunately, too many people think their time isn't valuable, until, they're stricken with some type of, health emergency or whatever. And that's unfortunately when oftentimes, visions change or their perceptions change. It has to come down to that. And sometimes it can be too late.
I think with that, there's the reality of life too. Sometimes having your own business would be too hard to get going because of your situation. You got mouths to feed, and so having a job is totally fun. And I'm not somebody. You may have heard this before, Karl, and people saying, "Oh, I've been an entrepreneur for so long, I'm unemployable." I do not believe that I'm unemployable. I think I'd be a great employee. And I would be open to doing that if that was what was required to feed my family. The goal, though, the hope is that I don't need to do that, and that I've got so much of a runway and so many different opportunities. I mean, the opportunities online and even in person have gotten tremendously larger over the last 10 years, in my opinion, to make money in so many different ways that there's so many opportunities to pivot. It's why I have over, I think, 15 different streams of income at this point, is because I can pivot if I need to. I've been able to add them in over the last 10 years. And so if one fell down, some of the others support. Now, if I had a huge one fall down and, it just went away tomorrow, the others wouldn't support my lifestyle the way that I have it now, but it would be at least a softer landing. I had a job and they just cut me loose, and then you're left with nothing.
Yeah.
And so That's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, man. Appreciate you making that. Because success is fleeting, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. And I think you've mentioned this before. I just want to make this abundantly clear for those that are listening right now, or listening later. Because success is fleeting, tell me about a time you hit a massive goal, a revenue milestone that you thought would fix everything. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, seasoned ones, I think they know a little better, right? But let's talk to those who are looking to build or in that process of starting to build, and they think, man, once I get to 100,000 in revenue or 1 million in revenue, my problems will disappear, right? But with you, when you hit your milestones, I'd love to hear your perspective. Did it fix everything, or did you still feel empty?
So yeah, there's actually some, I don't know if it's scientific, but there's definitely literature to back this up. There is a point where I believe it's roughly $80,000 per year in the U.S. that makes a huge difference in lifestyle and happiness. And that's because it can help pay for groceries. You can get, good health insurance. You can typically go on a trip, and you can pay for your bills and kind of be at a middle class or upper middle class level. I think that is an important goal. Typically, $80,000 to $100,000 in profit or revenue that you're able to pay your own personal expenses from. That's usually that point. Now, beyond that point, it's kind of a law of diminishing returns. Whether you make $30,000 per month of profit or you make $1 million per month in profit, really your happiness level doesn't change a ton. It's just more stuff you buy. And so I do think that there is a point that, you're going to be a lot happier if you can make X number of dollars. I would say that's roughly $80,000 to $100,000 a year. And then after that point, it becomes more just personal goals and challenges to try to grow, try to maybe get ahead just in case things were to fall back behind. And so I would say at that point, you need to be cognizant of kind of where your heart is. Is your heart in only the money? Is your heart in only the success? Or are you trying to use that for bigger goals, things that actually drive you forward and improve the world in different ways? I think that I have more of a heart for impact and community than I do for trying to make as much money as I possibly can. And that could be kind of a downfall in some ways, and it can also be a benefit. The more you can impact people, a lot of times the more money you can make. But obviously there's a trade-off. You can't just give away everything for free and impact a bunch of people and then make $0 for your time and effort. So there's always that trade-off. But I don't know if that answered your question, but I do think there is a real reality. You can look up the news and literature about it. It used to be about $70,000 to $75,000 a year. With inflation, it's up over 80 now. And obviously it'll be different on different regions of the country, whether you're in California or you're in, Missouri. And so, there is a number. And once you get over that number, it starts to diminish how much it actually impacts your life.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, if you're in California making that, you're below poverty.
Exactly.
Whereas, when I lived in lower Alabama, where, you could have a beautiful home and in an actual pool, where here in South Florida, what they call a pool is almost more like a hot tub.
Yeah.
Definitely not a pool. As I open this, I mentioned that in my opinion, and I'm with 100% belief of this, your one of your gifts is to be able to create systems, be able to think creatively, even not just for yourself, but for other people. And I've always admired that about you, man. I want to open up the playbook a little bit because especially, those either that are seasoned entrepreneurs or just builders in general, that they are just capped, right? They're stressed. They have all the stress because, everything's dependent on them, but they're working 80, 90 hours a week. They think by putting in more time equals more money, right? But you have a different philosophy, removing yourself as fast as possible. So talk to that entrepreneur, if you don't mind, somebody who's grinding 80 hours a week. Been there myself, but talk to that entrepreneur who was reluctant at removing himself. Like what made it possible for you to do that? And talk to the entrepreneur who's like on the brink of destruction because they're not able to do it or don't want to.
Yeah, if somebody's working 80 or 90 hours a week and they haven't started to outsource certain things, there's probably a couple things going on with that. One is they're either charging not enough money for their time, and what they're doing is just not working, so that they don't even have the money to be able to pay for somebody. That's a risk that you have. But another issue a lot of times is that, and I've run up against this, where I think that I can do my business better than anybody else, and so I can't hire somebody to make this decision. When in reality, it's kind of doesn't make sense, because I learned it. I'm sure somebody else can learn it. It's not like I completely invented something new and it only came from my brain and that you have to continue to invent. And if that was the case, then all the other things underneath that invention, you can outsource all of that, but you would be the person in charge of inventing new things. But anyway, so whenever you look at this, I would just say, okay, look at your time, look at what you believe your time is worth. A lot of businesses have multiple things that they're doing that are probably $15 to $25 an hour jobs, or if it's admin online, it could be $5 to $6 an hour if you can hire a virtual assistant in the Philippines or something. And so, is your time worth $15 to do this one task? For me, that was prep and ship in the Amazon business. I was doing prep and ship for 20 hours a week whenever I had quit my job, and I looked at that. I'm like, well, I can source new products and I could make $75 an hour. Why don't I just pay somebody $15 to $20 an hour, and then I can go do the $70 an hour task? And then eventually I was able to outsource that so that then I could focus on other things as well. I could outsource the sourcing. It comes down to, how do you value your time? And if it really is a math equation, right? If you are a plumber and you can hire another plumber, a junior plumber, an associate or something to do it for $50,000 a year, and you can go grow your business by another $70,000 or $100,000 because now you're better at selling than you are at plumbing, then these things they add up. It's a true you've got to take a little bit of risk up front to train somebody, and it doesn't always work out. Sometimes people leave, or they'll take your ideas and they'll go try to start their own business. But if you're always worried about that, you'll never grow anyway. I recently hired 2 more people. They're in the Philippines, but I took that risk. I was looking at my numbers. I'm like, I don't know if I can fully afford this, but I talk a big game that, hey, if my time is worth, the more than $7 or $8 an hour, then I should be able to, divert my attention. And it's worked. It's worked out so far, right? And it's scary. Even if it's $5 to $7 an hour, or somebody you're hiring in the Philippines, it still feels like an expense that you don't want to spend, because maybe this business is kind of tight and it's got it's not as profitable as you want. But the only way for it to grow, and the other thing that I also think about, it's not just the only way for it to grow, but is my time with my family worth $6 an hour? Absolutely. I would definitely, I'd spend way more than that to have an extra hour with my family. And so, you've got to look at that. You still have to be smart. If you have $0 or you're negative, you can't just go spending a bunch of money to try to outsource everything. But, you can do it in a slow and controlled way, outsource the lowest value tasks first, the most repetitive tasks first. And then you start focusing your own time on higher value things. And that's usually the way that I recommend it. Now, systems and all of that's a whole different thing now, but with AI, you can build systems fairly easily. And that's changed the game over the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah. And it's going to change significantly more in the next 3 or 4 years, I'm sure. You touched on something that I hear a lot from entrepreneurs, and I just love to hear your opinion on this. What I heard you touch on is, the risk or the potential for the person that you're training, to run off and start their own. I'm of the belief that the chances of that happening is minimal. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. That would be irresponsible for me to say, but I'm of the belief that the percentage of that, or the chances of that happening, is very, very minimal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the chances are definitely minimal. I think there's other things that go into that thought that should be addressed. One, that sounds like a lack of confidence in yourself to actually compete. You don't have confidence that you can actually continue to win at a high level. If you were to train somebody to do something, I would look at that first. Yes, most likely you're not going to have an employee, somebody that has that mindset of an employee that would end up leaving to start their own thing, especially if you bring them in and you show them all these things that you have to deal with and you're trying to train them on 5 or 10 of them. And they're going to say, I don't want to do the other 95 things that you're dealing with. Like, I'm just going to do my thing and get my paycheck, right? The majority of people think in terms of how do I just get my money so that I can, have my Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, I can do whatever I want. And so that's usually the case. But yeah, if you're worried about that, I think there's a couple other things. So it's not just that you're worried about it. You probably don't have enough confidence in yourself. It's also you don't believe in the fact that the market's big enough. Now, as somebody who has trained thousands of people to replicate my business selling on Amazon, the market's big enough. Okay. I can guarantee that. It was a fear that I had whenever I first did that course, was that, hey, I'm going to do this and people are going to just saturate it. It's gotten harder. But it is not because of me that it's gotten harder. It's not because everybody's doing this now and it's so much harder. It's, because the platform has changed a little bit. So that has gotten a little bit more difficult. But yeah, the opportunity is still there. People that are succeeding at a high level on Amazon are succeeding at a higher level now. It's just a little bit harder to start. So if anything, I'm in a better position now than I was, 7 or 8 years ago. And so there's those considerations too. It's even if they were competing, more eyeballs on a thing raises the eyeballs on your own business. So that's why you see a McDonald's and a Burger King on the same exact corner, or CVS and a Walgreens, or a Starbucks and a Dunkin' Donuts. They're always right around each other. That's why there's a whole row of car dealerships. It's because the attention that multiple different businesses bring to one location or one business allows for good competition, but also brings out an awareness that more people are going to end up purchasing from that. And so then it's just being a savvy business owner. If you're just letting them crush you, the competition crush you, then you're going to be dealing with that anyway. That's always a concern. But to train somebody and then they run off and do the same thing, you can be upset about it, but you still have to have some belief in yourself.
Great. No, great points, man. Great points. Appreciate you sharing that. You touched on this, especially for, let's aim this towards, we're talking to that person who, they're like, all right, Jimmy, I'm ready to take some imperfect action here. I'm tired of giving my time to somebody who give a rat's tootie about me, right? I'm just a number to them. So talk to that person who has probably 500 to 1,000 or whatever it is that they have in their bank account. They're ready to start that side hustle. What will be the exact first step of turning that capital, whatever that seed is? Maybe it's a line of credit on a credit card or for $500. Maybe it's savings account of 1,000. What would their next steps would be to turn that into a business?
Yeah, so there's a couple extra questions that I would want to ask that person for things that they like to do, the type of business they want to run. And I could tell them easily to say, hey, go and start an Amazon business or an eBay business where you're buying products and you're reselling them at a higher markup. However, that business model is not what everybody wants. In some cases, it may be better to start a service business. If you've got a particular skill and, you're good at fixing stuff up, you can start a handyman service. You could go power wash, garbage bins. I've seen that. People sign up $20-$30 a month for that, right? You can do all kinds of things. So I have more questions about that. The easiest thing, if somebody's got $0, is to go around their house, sell some stuff on eBay or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, get some of that capital, and then start doing more of that. But the quickest path to getting money in your bank account is going to be a service-based business where you are essentially selling, you house painting or doing power washing or something like that, where you can not have to buy any inventory upfront. So it just really depends on your level. If you've got $50,000 and you're trying to figure out how to invest it, well, then maybe a little bit different. Let's look at building a brand and, actually creating something that has a long-term sellable aspect to it. But there's so many ways to make money at this point that I've got multiple different avenues that I would recommend to anybody, depending on their skill sets, what they're interested in doing, and how they want to live and work their lives.
Yes, but there are no shortages of opportunities. It's only a matter of finding the right one for this specific season, right? And especially in the era of AI and the involvement, man, there's a whole nother sector of opportunities that you can create just using AI, and solving people's problems, and that's not even a $20 monthly subscription. ChatGPT or Claude or your model of choice. As we start to wrap this up, I'd love to hear your insight on this, because grit looks different every season of life. Right now, in this specific season that you're in, what is grit looking like for you in this season? What is your definition of that?
I would actually say it's the same exact definition for me in every season, which is doing what I have to do every single day, no matter whether I feel like it or not. And so that to me is grit. Actually getting up, being responsible, doing the 3 to 5 things that I want to or need to that day to move my business and life forward. We've talked about things before, like the power list from Andy Frisella and those types of things. That's basically grit to me. And that would apply to everyone. Whether you have 6 kids and you're a stay-at-home mom, or you're single, or you're married with no kids like myself, it's a situation where you can at least apply that to your life of, okay, I have to do these X amount of things per day, and whether I want to or not, I'm going to do my best to do that more days than I don't. And so that's the whole goal. So that's my definition of grit.
I love the fact that you mentioned that power list. 3 to 5 things you can. That I know that's something you and I have jammed on independently, or even together. And, it's something that we can focus on every day to be growth focused, growth oriented. That's awesome. In this recent season I'm in, instead of always looking at things I can add, right? New systems, new processes, new habits, new whatever, constantly adding. I've recently started to shift my focus to what can I remove out of my, what am I going to stop doing? And it could be a habit, or, some type of point that's causing friction in my life, whatever, plans or behaviors. Is there anything that comes to mind that maybe could be one thing in either in a season or maybe in life in general that you're putting focus on that you're stopping doing? Man, the grammar police is going to be out on that one. What is one habit or point of life point of friction that's causing for you that you're stopping?
That's a good question. There's probably a few things. Some of them are business related in terms of administrative things that, I always felt like I had to stay in control of my email, and I finally have gotten that kind of offloaded. But as an online entrepreneur, it's easy to become isolated, even if you're speaking to people on Zoom all the time, which I do. And so for me, I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional about building local community. I moved to Florida a couple of years ago, and, I've made some friends here or there, but I'm focusing more on that. And so kind of removing myself from some of the business operations so that then I can focus on the local community. I would say that's more of an add-in than a removal of things, but I had to remove administrative tasks. I had to remove things that were on my plate for, 4 to 5 hours, every day or two, so that way I have time to be able to build those relationships. So, I would say that would probably be it. I've been pretty good for years about staying on a typical workout schedule and eating certain types of foods and all of that. So I've gone through those processes of how do I remove bad foods from my life and have 80% of my food be good stuff. So I've gone through all of those different stages, and at this point, it's about just trying to maximize my time and build community, and then hopefully be able to set myself up to, if we're blessed with children in the future, being able to be present for that. So I don't know if that answers the question fully or not, but yeah.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. When the lights go out, and you're in the thick of it, you're in the trenches and so forth, is there any specific quote or directive, or maybe it's a scripture that you tell yourself or that you repeat to yourself to keep moving forward?
to keep moving forward, maybe a little bit differently, I would say for me, there is a scripture that comes to mind. There's a couple of them, obviously, but as a Christian, that's impactful for me. The one that's been on my phone for the last 2 years as my like home screen is Psalm 34:14, which is seek peace and pursue it. And for me, it's not just about, I want to have a peaceful life. That is an active directive for us. You seek it and you pursue it. So it's not just seek it; it's also pursue it. There's so much that goes into trying to have a peace-filled life, and we are surrounded by so much in the world that tries to distract us from that. Our lives are on our phones a lot of times, on our computers, and the very intention of social media a lot of times now is to distract, and that causes an internal turmoil. And so as much as you can, trying to control that and intentionally pursue peace-filled things, which for me could be reading my Bible, could be spending time with family, friends, etc. Another one that always comes to mind for me in terms of a Bible verse is, I don't have the verse written down, but I resolve to know nothing except Christ and Him crucified. And that for me is just a reminder that the main goal for me is to know that Christ and Him crucified. Everything else that I have that feels like it props me up is just an illusion of security. It really is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And so I need to remember kind of the order of importance, that if I knew nothing else but Christ and Him crucified, then I would be good, right? If that's all that I knew. But I know other things, but that has to be subservient to that main capstone.
No, I agree. Awesome, man. Love it. Thanks, you. One of the things that I see that high achievers struggle with, or I would say struggle with, we're expert critics of ourselves, right? So as we start to wrap up here, I would just love to hear if there's one mistake or failure that you've made where you've had to finally forgive yourself in order to find yourself to level up on. Is there anything that falls in the umbrella of that?
From a business standpoint?
Any aspect. Well, it's not necessarily, it didn't have to be business related. It could be personal or business, but is there anything in your life that there was a misstep or mistake you made, and like, you know what, you just finally had to release yourself of this so you could start moving forward?
Absolutely. I've been divorced before, so that would be one. That takes a couple years to work through. So that would be one that held me back for a little while. In terms of business, I've made some bad real estate deals, and that cost me a bunch of money before. And I've invested into programs that at this point, I've gotten the money back for probably half of this, but over $100,000 of scammed courses. Because as somebody that teaches and sells courses and content and whatnot, I am also a consumer. I'm probably one of the easiest sells for a course person because I'm interested in kind of how they teach and how they sell and all these things. And because of the industry, I've fallen prey to a bunch of mistakes. So personally would be, having to work through kind of the difficulties of the divorce and kind of my identity being tied up in a relationship that was no longer, there. And then also with business stuff, just making mistakes that cost me a bunch of money that I could have put towards other things, but they weren't mistakes. I've learned, and you grow from that. But the great thing is that there's other things that I've made a lot of money from that I did buy that were good courses. And, one of them was the Amazon one, right?
Yeah.
Back in 2015. So, these types of things you work through, and those mistakes happen.
Agree, man. Agree. All right. Lastly, man, actually, it's a two-part question here because I love the concept of forward iron, right? Sharpening iron. And I always ask a guest, if you're in my shoes interviewing the next guest, what would be that one question that you would want to ask that person? But before you share that, let me share the question that was asked to you. This is anonymous, right? So it's not like they know who the guest lineup is. And ironically, every question is matched up perfectly. So the previous guest asked you this: what is the most influential book you've read to date and why?
Let me ask, because this could be considered a cop-out. Does the Bible count?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Well, then, if that does count, I'll try to give you two answers, because I know it's like the Sunday school answer. Of course, the answer is Jesus, right? And so, in this case, the Bible. Why? Because I think that is, if you really look at life, I think the most important question you have to ask and answer and try to answer is what happens at the end of it, and where do you go and what do you believe about it? If you don't have an answer to that question, then a lot of this stuff is meaningless, in my opinion. And for me, where I found that answer is through Jesus and through my faith. Now, that's something that I didn't always have. I grew up in the Christian church. I looked at the Bible as a textbook because it was another class that I had. And so in building my relationship by reading through it fully, knowing what I even agreed to as a Christian, right? A lot of Christians are out there, 70% never read the Bible.
It's
they
true.
just actually signed a contract that they don't know what's in the book. And so I'm not judging, because I've been there, but it's so important to read that if you say you are a believer. And even if you don't, why do so many people around the world die for this thing? I think that's also an important question to ask and to try to answer, even if you disagree with it, totally fine. And so for me, it's impactful. There's more in the Bible about money and business than there are about a lot of other topics like love.
Great. Yeah.
So looking at that would be another reason. Now, in terms of impactful books, I'm looking back on my little shelf back here, trying to think what would be the one. Evangelpreneur by Josh Tolley was a book that significantly impacted me about the importance of being an entrepreneur, especially if you're a believer. And the reason is because most couples in today's world, they leave for the majority of their day to go work at a job that they put their best foot forward on, and then they come home and they have like 25 minutes to spend with one another, and they're usually angry and upset about their day, and it's just not good. And so I really would say that impacted me quite a lot. Additionally, let's see, there is, let's look for another business book that I have to think of. I really did like the 4-Hour Work Week by Timothy Ferriss for its principles more than its actual application. It's very difficult to work for 4 hours unless you're extremely wealthy. But I like the principles behind it, which is what we talked about today on systems. So and outsourcing. And then my question for the next entrepreneur. Man, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit, I think. But my question would probably be tailored to whoever that is. But if it's anonymous, I think the question would be, if you had to start over today from everything that you're doing, what would you do? If you had to start over, would you do the same exact thing? Or would it be something completely different because opportunity and landscape always change?
And ironically, it's going to fit well with the next guest.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, cool. Well, that's it. Jimmy, my dude, I really appreciate you joining me and sharing the last hour and sharing all the insight and really, going behind, allowing us to have a sneak peek into your life, essentially your lessons and things you've learned along the way, not just sharing the highlight reels, but sharing, some of the darkness and some of the lessons learned and some of the things you've had to let go of, mistakes we've made, missteps and so forth. Where can somebody find more information about you? For the person who, resonates with what you said, they want to learn more about you, what you do and so forth. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me online pretty much at any social media network at Ask Jimmy Smith. You can also go to askjimmysmith.com. A lot of the stuff that I talk about is Amazon related, but also business related too. And I'm expanding that stuff as well. If you're on LinkedIn, it would be a different handle, but that's at my website. So you can go to askjimmysmith.com to find that LinkedIn link.
Awesome. Amazing, man. Well, I will definitely be dropping all of these in the show notes. So again, Jimmy, thank you so much for stepping in the arena today. It was an absolute honor to have you. So I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Karl. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. We don't grow by just listening. We grow by doing. The gap between average and excellence is just action, even imperfect action. My challenge to you today is simple. Just take one specific tool or insight from this conversation. Maybe it's auditing your time or finally hiring that VA and use it in the next 24 hours. Do not wait to feel ready. Action creates the feeling. And remember, you are one decision, one habit, and one moment of grit away from a completely different life. But you cannot build a life of substance alone. If this episode added value to your life, please do the unseen work of a leader and share it. Text this link to one friend or a team member who needs to hear this message today. Be their catalyst for growth. I believe in you, and I'll see you for the next rep. Let's get after it.